All right, welcome to this March 12th, 2021 special called board meeting. Would all of you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming on such short notice. The reason we are here today, the governor and the legislature of North Carolina have come to a consensus on return to learn for our kids in North Carolina. So we have a couple of options that we need to discuss today, most notably being grades 6 through 12. So first order of business will be an agenda approval. I will take a motion for that agenda approval.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh,
Look, you're never
Kathy is
retiring.
always keeping me straight.
You're
Yes.
never retiring. 2022 now, girl.
Just to let everyone know, Mrs. Caskey and Dr. Revis are joining us by phone today. They are out of town, so but they are here. Can you two hear us?
Yes, we can. I can.
Dr. Revis?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Yes, I can.
Do we
Thank
need a
you.
roll call
Beautiful.
vote? We need a roll
So we're going to need to do a roll call now on that agenda approval. I had a first by Mrs. Holt. I have a second by Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, yes or no agenda approval?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Ms. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Egoff?
Yes.
Mrs. Caskey?
Yes.
Dr. Revis?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. All right, now we have public comments. We did receive probably 25 public comments by email, being that we are allowing folks to come into the building now to actually deliver public comments to us in person. We will not be reading those emailed public comments. So on to new business. And Dr. John Bryant, this is for a return to learn recommendation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Craven, and members of the board. It is certainly my pleasure to be able to be sharing with you a little bit today. I know that we just met on Monday, but as we made a commitment to each other that should the circumstances and the landscape change, that we would find ourselves back together again. And before I start, I would like to just speak to what in so many ways is the powerful moment of what this day is. It is almost exactly 1 year to the day that schools received a change unlike that we've never dealt before. It was Friday, March the 13th, that we last attended face-to-face instruction full-time at any time. It was March the 11th when the World Health Organization declared a pandemic across our country and in our world. And it was March the 14th when Governor Roy Cooper closed all public schools in North Carolina of 2020. And so in a lot of respects, I simply want to acknowledge as we typed this day on the board slides, it's representative of, again, nearly 1 year as we've worked through this together. And so I simply wanted to bring that to light as we prepare to talk. Each of our Return to Learn updates have shared the Harvard Global Health Institute data information, and it is very similar to what you saw earlier this week as it relates to how we are seeing that data trend in our community, and specifically in Henderson County, the 7-day rolling average. If you were to look at the data today, it last reports as of Wednesday of this week, and that's 23.1. So again, we continue to see that data set roll down. You've seen these slides before as it relates to the County Alert System report. What you're looking at right now is January 6th, January 21st, February the 4th, February 22nd, and then the most recent data on March the 4th. Again, continuing to trend down that 14-day positive percent rate in our community below 4%. Specifically, you note that on that slide, and again, Henderson County remains in the lowest risk tier according to DHHS's County Alert System report. The reason, of course, that we are gathered here today is that there was a bipartisan effort that was announced earlier this week, ratified yesterday as it relates to an amendment to Senate Bill 220. And the specificity of that was the specificity that school boards across the state were speaking to as it related to the permissions for school system operations. This amendment has some new and very specific language in it, and so I'm going to spend some time reading each of these pieces with you, and please feel free to stop me if there are specific questions about this information. And so specifically, some of that initial information is it directs school administrative units to provide in-person instruction to students in grades kindergarten through 12 for the remainder of the scheduled 2020-2021 school year, and to do so no later than the 21 days after the effectiveness, so 21 days from March the 11th in that respect. It gets very specific about what that means along a couple of grade levels. First and foremost, it says local boards shall provide in-person instruction in kindergarten through grade 5 with minimal social distancing, that is Plan A, to all students, kindergarten through grade 5. Specific to Henderson County Public Schools, this board has already made that decision. We have been operating under that plan since late February. And you remember that transition occurred in our school system, or was supposed to occur on February the 18th, but that was an inclement weather day. And so it actually began on Friday the 19th. But we are already meeting that expectation of this legislation. Yes, sir.
And we are still providing an option for those that so choose to not be in person, correct?
Yes, sir. That's exactly right. And in just a couple of slides, I'll share with you that particular piece as well. But Mr. Egoff, as you've noted, this requires us to provide this opportunity for people that choose it, but the remote option remains. Yes, sir. Bullet 2 speaks to grades 6 through 12. Now, previous to this amended legislation, the only plan that was permissible was Plan B, which is a requirement of 6 feet of social distancing in classroom spaces and in school spaces. Plan A was not an eligible operation for middle schools and high schools. This legislation now says local boards shall provide in-person instruction either under Plan A, and again, minimal social distancing. And I want to speak to just one time what that means. That means the elimination of it as a requirement in classroom spaces. One cannot have 24, 25, or 30 students in a classroom space that was not designed for that to be the condition, just like in 4th and 5th grade when we transition there. Plan A operations mean social distancing only occurs when and where it's possible. So if you're in a hallway or you're a large gathering space or the classroom permits it, then it's necessary. Plan B operations are the requirement of that 6 feet of social distancing, or both, to all students in grades 6 through 12. So for the first time, local boards of education, literally as of today, can choose Plan A or Plan B for middle schools and high schools. Yes, ma'am?
Several letters or emails of the toolkit that we've been going by,
Yes, ma'am.
and they said as of March 4th, they still had social distancing.
That's
So-
correct. That's correct. So I think we can fully expect in this case, now that the legislation is ratified, the toolkit will be updated as well. What we've heard from DHHS is that that would be the case. And so part of what's happened each time there's been updated legislative language and otherwise, the toolkit has been revised to match those opportunities. Yes, ma'am. So the current toolkit right now is as of March 4th. New legislation on March 11th, we should expect revised toolkit information moving forward. But this particular information is about governing bodies like the Board of Education making a choice for school system operations. And as defined by the toolkit, Plan A is minimal social distancing. Plan B is the requirement for it.
Has the governor signed this?
Yes, ma'am, he has. He signed it late yesterday. Now, boards of education, again, have the opportunity to choose Plan A or Plan B. If school systems choose Plan B, then the caveat is those bullets at the bottom. And that is the requirement then that individual parents and guardians have the ability to choose for their children who are identified under IDEA, EC students, or a student with a 504 would be eligible to attend school every day if they so choose. So that's an important piece of the legislation as well. So regardless of operation, A meaning everyone who chooses to come face-to-face on the schedule that's established, In the absence of that, then families whose children are identified EC or 504 would be eligible to attend school every day.
Do you have the percentage of how many of our kids 6 through 12 or come close have a 504 or an IEP?
The EC percent is about 14%, I believe. Yeah, it's about
14%?
14%. Yes.
But when those kids change classes with high schools, if we stayed on Plan B, there's not going to be a Plan A for them changing classes.
I'm not sure. Can you rephrase the question?
If the kids who have the stipulations,
Yes, ma'am.
if they're going to probably be inclusion, a lot of them are inclusion, right, Wendy? And if we stayed on Plan B, they could not come A because they'd have, well, I guess they could come AB.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's what
They'd be eligible to attend school every day.
AB.
Absolutely. They essentially would become A and B students.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. So this is specific language as it relates to those choices. And again, I highlight this because when we last met on Monday, we highlighted what options were available. And right now, elementary, the only option is K-5 every day. We are already operating that way. 6-12, the options are now A and B. Mr. Egoff wisely brought this up, but I'm glad to note it again. With this amended language, the remote option remains for all students and all families who so choose. So it is not the elimination of the remote option, it is the continuation of the remote option, and that's at the discretion of the parent and the guardian. And I think that that's critically important because some people hear Plan A and believe it's a requirement for students to participate in daily face-to-face instruction. It is not. Just as the remote option continues for elementary school students, it would continue for grades 6 through 12.
And if the parents send a kid back on A, but they see that it's more dangerous than they thought, they were going to let them switch back and forth?
Yes, ma'am, most certainly. I appreciate that question. As we talk about parent choice, one of the commitments that we've made and this board has supported is we've told parents and families that they would have the ability to choose every time the plan changes because the conditions change. You may have been comfortable in one environment and less comfortable in the other. You may have been comfortable at one time because what you felt in November is different than what you felt in February. And so parents have had the opportunity, every time we have transition plans, they've been able to make choices moving forward. For example, as we moved to Plan A in our elementary schools, we saw our daily face-to-face instruction go up. So more people chose face-to-face instruction than had previously as soon as it was operating each and every day. But to your point, Ms. Case, families would have that discretion to choose so. Another critical piece of Senate Bill 220 and the amendment to it requires that boards of education who choose participation under Plan A then participate by statute in the ABC Collaborative, which is essentially a data collection by the schools of medicine at Duke University and UNC working together to analyze the data around operations. Now, for Henderson County Public Schools, that's not terribly different than we're doing already because we are tracking school-affected cases as it relates to COVID positives. We are communicating those in our school-affected communities, and we're, of course, working in close concert with the Department of Public Health. But in order to go to A for 6 through 12, boards would have to make a commitment to share that data with the ABC Collaborative because they want to track the safe operations of school systems. And so it requires us to commit to sharing that data in that respect. It is summary data. It's not individual data, so it wouldn't be personally identifiable health information, but it would be summary data as it relates to school-affected cases and otherwise. And while they've not published the details of how that information would be transferred back and forth, we were well aware that that might be an expectation. Now, when we think about these operations, I think it's also important to give a brief recap as it relates to school and community safety and the measures that are currently in place and the measures that will continue to be in place moving forward. The toolkit that Ms. Case referenced before still is very specific, and in the legislation, this is the language specifically out of the legislation, that we are required to comply with the requirements of that toolkit. And again, as that guidance existed on March the 4th for the implementation of A, minimal social distancing, and B. And one of the key features, if I could speak to Mrs. Case's question again, is In order to understand the application of that toolkit, you have to be in the right section. Are you in the A section, which says minimal social distancing no longer required, only where it's available, only where it's possible, or B, which is the section that says we are creating those conditions on every space, the required part of those conditions. But as the toolkit is updated, as guidance is updated, we of course would be required to follow it.
Masks are still required.
Yes, sir, they are. One of the basic requirements is the expectation that face coverings still exist and are a required function of all students, staff, visitors, and anybody on a school campus. Yes, sir. The district dashboard I spoke to, well, this is a publication that we have been operating since the very beginning of our school year in face-to-face instruction. It is school-affected cases that are tracked on a daily basis the next business day. We're making those school-affected calls specific to what parents and families and staff can expect. We've been communicating that information on a regular basis, continuing to work with our health department about how we share that information. You heard on Monday evening about the vaccination effort and the critically important work that was done in our community from our healthcare partners. It is also important to understand what that means in terms of the timing of the discussion that the board might consider here today. Specific to what you see in front of you, it's understanding what is the level of effectiveness of those who have chosen to participate voluntarily, and I want to emphasize that. We created opportunities through our local healthcare partnerships, specifically with Party UNC Health and Blue Ridge Health, to provide the vaccination to every employee who wanted to participate in that effort. Those who have done so, as it relates to the effectiveness of dose 1 and the research that's been made available by the World Health Organization and the New England Journal of Medicine, and I specifically asked from our health department and the trusted leader that is Steve Smith, what is the research around employee safety and individually adult safety who've chosen to participate in this as it relates to effectiveness after dose 1 and 14 days? And as you can see here, it's 92%. So in terms of the effectiveness of dose 1 for individuals that chose to participate in that, and again, that research is based on ultimately those trial groups and the work that's being done across the board and across the country. Day 14 at the latest for folks who have participated in that vaccination effort is tomorrow. So when we think about where we are in that particular schedule, dose 2 begins next week for our employees on the 19th. So those folks that were involved in the Pfizer vaccine, which is 21 days roughly after you receive first dose, that starts next week. Those who are the Moderna, which is the 28-day period, would be the following week. So you're looking at a particular circumstance where, again, 92% effectiveness after dose 1 in 14 days, and day 14 is tomorrow. Yes, ma'am, Ms.
So
Case.
some of our teachers will not be the second dose until the 20th, the 26th, or the 27th, correct?
Potentially, yes, ma'am, the following week. That's correct.
So we have approximately 1,800 employees.
Yes,
somewhere
sir,
around there.
roughly.
And I believe at our meeting Monday, you said about 1,200 took advantage of the opportunity to have the vaccine.
Yes,
Are
sir.
we keeping any data as to those appointments being kept and what teachers have been vaccinated? And are we going to keep that data on the folks that take the second shot next week?
What we have access to are the appointments that are scheduled as it relates to particular employees, okay? So the individual participation is directly related to the appointments that are there. What we also know to be true, Mr. Craven, is a lot of employees may have been eligible under another group or got appointments themselves outside of that. I can share anecdotal stories where folks have driven to other communities, other counties, and even other states and received access to the vaccine as not part of our effort. So in many respects, we know our numbers to be more than 1,200 as it relates to that.
I guess my point is it a HIPAA violation for us to know individual information as to, we know if they made an appointment, we don't know if they actually got the shot, correct?
Correct, for the most part. But the HIPAA question, I would defer to Mr. Shatley on that one.
I'm
No, there's no HIPAA violation. One, we're not subject to HIPAA or volunteering. Whether or not they get it, that's up to them. That's their ability to disclose it. And the fact that we just know that people have appointments that we assist in setting up.
I mean, I'd like to know how many people actually got it. Did we have 50 people not show up? Did we have 100 people not show up? And then also for the second shot, does that make sense? Like how many people actually got the shot, not just made an appointment?
And again, what we've been able to assist with is the vaccination effort as it
Totally
relates to.
does
He's
that.
going to say it in another way for you.
Yes.
No, you
Yes.
can't have that info.
Yeah.
Okay,
What
so
I,
I'm
what
gonna,
I
I'm
can
gonna
speak
ask,
to is we had, you know, roughly 1,000 people participate in the vaccination effort on the 24th, the 25th, and the 26th, those first 3 days that we were eligible.
I believe Ms. Caskey had a question.
I do. There were some parent concerns where if they were sending their children back full time, they were concerned that their teacher was not one of the ones who took advantage of the vaccine opportunity. Again, without divulging personal information, how are we going to deal with that?
We're not. We're not.
We're not. I mean,
Yeah.
at this point in time, sorry, let me turn my microphone on there. We would not be able to necessarily deal with that. I mean, we can ask employees to voluntarily let us know if they've gotten the vaccine. We obviously know if they've scheduled it through us. I mean, unless the board, short of making some sort of requirement to do that vaccine. But right now, I mean, we're recommending that you incentivized and try to attempt to get employees to voluntarily obtain their vaccine. And so it would be up to an employee to tell us whether or not they've been vaccinated or not.
So-
Absolutely. But what about the parent who is concerned about sending their child back if the teacher has not been vaccinated?
We would never tell them whether or not the teacher has been vaccinated unless the teacher gave us permission to do so.
And my thing is parents have the opportunity to keep their children home. If they have somebody high risk in their house, if they don't feel it's safe, they can keep their child at home. Teachers aren't having that opportunity, but we gave them, thankfully through Party and Blue Ridge Health, the opportunity to be vaccinated. So I think, parents have a lot more leeway here than an employee does. And as long as our teachers are protected, we know that they can be in the classroom, and parents, which it's their job to make decisions about their children. It's not my job to make a decision about what a parent should be doing with their child. I think this puts this back right where it needs to be.
And I have a question. Right here, you were talking the two vaccines, approximately 92% effective after the first dose. And I know you're not Steve Smith. I know you're not a doctor. However,
I am a doctor.
He is a doctor.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean a medical doctor.
If I write you a
Sorry.
prescription, it will not help you.
Everybody
Yes, sir.
jumped out there. Sorry about that. You are a doctor, maybe not a medical doctor. But are either of these vaccines 100% effective after you take the second dose and after 14 days? Is it 100% effective?
Not to my knowledge, but I am not a medical doctor, so I wouldn't want to speak to that
You just
part.
play one on TV.
Yes, that's right. I just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
What is it when they've had their second shot, John? Do you know that?
I'm sorry.
What is the effectiveness after they've had their second shots?
I'd be glad to gather that data for you, but I don't have that in front of
I
me.
think it's around 96.
That's what I've heard.
Other questions about the vaccine as it relates to employee groups? The local authority that does continue to be represented here, and again, this is specific language as it relates to Senate Bill 220 and the amendment, is that local boards shall continue, ultimately, that word mine, not the legislation, but to have the authority to make day-to-day decisions concerning whether they need to shift an individual school or individual classroom from in-person instruction to remote instruction due to COVID-19 exposures, quarantines, staffing personnel, or otherwise. And that is very similar to what we've done up until this point. As this board is well aware, there have been circumstances where we've had to quarantine individual classrooms, where we have had to move to remote instruction for an entire school community over a period of time based on staffing concerns, those that occurred in late December. But the legislation, again, continues to rest that authority with this board so that we can operate on a daily basis, recognizing that conditions might change. So if I could just digress for just 1 second from the slide deck as it relates to before we step into the recommendation itself, and just speak to what it has taken to get to the point of this recommendation moving forward. There was much conversation on Wednesday about what an extraordinary effort is being modeled by our state as it relates to bipartisan effort to serve and support our kids. And I do believe locally that needs to be celebrated. That is something that we can lift up and honor and recognize, that the men and women who are leading in our state We're leading in our state in a way that allows for our Board of Education and boards of education across the state to make decisions that are best for their community. That cannot be understated. The other part that I want to speak to are the men and women who are serving and supporting in our community, and specifically the resilience of our teaching staff. I spoke to what we are doing right now nearly 1 year later, and what our staff has done. And I mean every member of our staff. I mean our teaching staff, our bus driving staff, our support personnel, our custodians, our child nutrition folks, our instructional support personnel. I mean every member who has been prepared for every change, for every moment for our shift, and said, you know what, we will meet this challenge head on. We will meet the challenge, and we'll meet it together, and we'll meet it even though it will be hard. I spoke to that piece of it, but it cannot be understated that here we are a year later with an opportunity to make a choice together today, and it is possible because of the resilience of our staff, the support of our families. When we talk about our community, we serve over 13,000 families in Henderson County. And it has only been possible, as many of you know, and have children with the school system or relatives with the school system or friends in your neighborhood, that it has been a full community effort to get to today. It is not done alone. It's not done just in a school facility or in someone's home or on a device. It has been done together, and it's been done together when it was challenging. It's been done together when it was a celebration and a success, but it has not happened without the support of our families. I cannot understate the power of our community partners as well. We have had churches, community agencies, reach out with a relentless support of saying, how do we help you navigate this space? How do we guide you and serve your children? How do we serve you when you're fully remote? How do we serve you when you're face-to-face? How do we make sure that we care for students and families and that we are there for them together? Our community partners have helped to make this possible. As you saw on the vaccination slide, had it not been for Party, UNC Help, and Blue Ridge Help, we could not even have the conversation that we're having today. Creates that opportunity for us. The school leaders that are championing the work in every classroom and in every school community, again, unwavering in their commitment to their school communities, their resilience through that work, their commitment to each other, and specifically to those colors that they wear with pride. They bleed purple and they bleed blue. They bleed red and they bleed green. They are committed to those school communities because it's about making sure that we serve and support each other. I would be remiss if, as I come to a close on this particular piece, if you didn't look out at what you see right here. Without those people, we would not be where we are today. Without you saying we serve and support and champion the children of Henderson County, we would not be here with the ability to choose to care for our children in a new way. Yes, I am emotional about it because I am so proud to serve in this community. And it's been the hardest time we've ever done it. The hardest time. But somebody came in my office this morning, one of our teachers, and Kathy can acknowledge this, and she said, you know what? This has been the most difficult year in public education and the most rewarding. And I was like, you know, you're right. Because it is hard. It has been a challenge every time we've done this. But there's been reward along the way. Not that it hasn't been difficult and painful and full of tears and grit and difficulty. Spoke with a teacher yesterday afternoon, a teacher at Hendersonville High School, and he said to me, you know, in some ways I feel like a teacher who's gone a year without pay. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, my currency is kids. My currency is relationships with children. My currency is having that in my space with me every day. And I am thrilled about the possibility of them being with me. And if you're in education, that's our space. Certainly it has been a challenge as it relates to school operations, but there is power in the opportunity that's in front of us.
Dr. Bryant,
Yes, sir.
you look at all counties in North Carolina, I think we need to take into consideration that Henderson County is at the top of that pedestal,
Amen. Mr.
all
Griffiths.
aspects.
Amen. There's no finer place to serve or educate or grow or learn or fail and pick each other up again than Henderson County Public Schools. It's with that in mind, as it relates to the work and the courage of this board and the support of this board, that we bring to you this recommendation and what it means for us as a school system. And specifically, it is this. We continue Plan A for all elementary school students, kindergarten through grade 5, for the remainder of the school year. By the amended legislation, that is a requirement. We are expected to do so at this particular point. Bullet 2. Now that the opportunity is presented for us, it is a transition to Plan A for all middle and high school students, grade 6 through grade 12, on Monday, March the 22nd. That is 1 week from next Monday. With that in mind, the legislation actually gives us an opportunity to amend our calendar to provide days of support, teacher work days, so that people can prepare for this transition, because it will be one. It will require facility preparation, instructional preparation. Every time we have shifted gears, whether it's been to C or to B or now to A, just like our elementary school folks have done already in February, there is a necessity to reframe how we prepare for instruction. And so we recommend a work day, Wednesday, March the 17th. That has already been Wednesdays for our middle school and high school students has been remote learning day. That is a non-face-to-face instruction day. We would be making a recommendation to move that to a required teacher work day, so no instruction for students at that particular time, allowing our teachers, our staff, and our school personnel an opportunity to prepare. And then, of course, with that recommendation, because that would shift us to Plan A as a school system for the final 8 weeks of the school year. We would continue to monitor community health trends, workforce stability, and we would continue our district communications to keep parents and families informed. So I'm going to pause there. Yes, sir.
Again, a couple questions. Just for my knowledge and everybody else's knowledge, continue Plan A. Plan virtual will still be offered for elementary.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
There's a choice.
Most certainly.
And then the transition to Plan A, again, would be a choice for those who choose to transition to Plan A, and virtual will still be an option.
Yes, sir. That's correct. That's correct. I've got a couple more slides here after I answer any
Sorry,
questions.
I'm cutting you short, Doc.
No, that's okay. It's like previewing. A strong
I'm just making
instructional
sure my mind
strategy.
is right.
Dr. Fry would tell me one of the strongest instructional strategies is previewing the content before you get it. So you are previewing the content ahead. But we'll speak a little bit further to the instructional piece of it, what that instructional framework looks like. But you have touched on it exactly correctly, Mr. Egoff. When we talk about this transition to A, this is not a required face-to-face instruction for each student. This is the choice that exists. It is simply would say that A operations, as we have discussed in elementary schools, are the elimination of the requirement for social distancing in classroom and school building spaces. It's the elimination of that. It means that if there are 30 students assigned to a class and 30 students want to attend that day, 30 students can be in that classroom. That's what that means. Face coverings, still required. Washing our hands, hand sanitation, safety procedures, cleaning, disinfecting, sanitizing, all those things are still in place.
And the mask requirement is per the governor,
That's correct.
not per us.
That's correct.
For those out there thinking that we're mandating masks, we're following orders from the governor.
That's correct. That's correct. So I'll pause on this particular slide unless you'd like me to come back to it at some
Yeah,
point.
let's do this. Let's you've got 2 more slides. Let's go ahead and get through those, and then I'm sure we all have a lot of questions and on this. So let's get through the next 2, and then we'll come back.
Absolutely. So from an instructional description, you might be asking, all right, so what does that mean as it relates to all of our schools? And specifically, it means all students grade 6 through 12 would return to a regular bell schedule. So you think about the school schedule and the school operational schedule. We're not being explicit about what that means in terms of the bell schedule, and I want to be clear as to why. Every bell schedule is different. Schools have bell schedules, whether you're a 4x4 or 7-period day. Our middle schools have specific special periods, rotational periods, elective periods. Some of our high schools have skinnies, year-long classes, semester classes. Some of our high schools have lead periods or homeroom periods. So based on that, we essentially would be just simply transitioning back to the regular bell schedule. As Mr. Egoff has noted, bullet 2 is live remote instruction remains an option. So that's still available to students, but it's different in terms of the expectation for participation than we're currently on right now. Right now, we're used to an 8 to 12 period with check-ins and additional support in the afternoons. What this would require is that students who are choosing the remote option are participating throughout the school day from 8 o'clock until 3 o'clock. And what the individual class period would look like would be at the discretion and the professionalism of our teachers. We would be creating balance in those class periods. I'll think like a 4x4 teacher. Mrs. Case and I both taught on the 4x4. So you might have direct instruction in the early part of the period, guided practice in the middle part of the period, and then when you get to independent practice, you might say to your remote learners, you now can log off of this screen, you can work independently for the next 45 minutes, and you log back in at the start of your second period class. That same situation might occur, but there would be an expectation of balance for our face-to-face and our remote learners across that board. But it would be that we would be returning to a bell schedule. So for a student who has only been, let's say, logging in until instruction until noon each day, that schedule is going to be moved all the way until 3 o'clock. It does not change the current remote schedule for elementary school students. And I want to be clear about that as well. This is a G6, G12, or grade 6 through grade 12. Yes, ma'am.
We have been having mass exits on some of our high schools at 12. These kids have jobs that they've had since the pandemic started. I don't see a lot of them quitting their jobs if we're expecting them to stay for 4 90-minute periods on a 90-minute day. So what are you going? Are we going to?
Well, while we know that for some students they have found other ways of engagement after the 12 o'clock, what we want is school to be their job. We want school to be their job from 8 o'clock until 3 o'clock. And while that was the condition before, we certainly recognize everybody's going to make individual choices. But from a school schedule standpoint, we're returning to the bell schedule. We would be looking at that 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock so that students have an expectation, schools have an expectation of engagement throughout the school day.
So a school could keep the schedule they've got under AB with the afternoon not having required courses.
No.
No, ma'am. We would be returning to a regular schedule.
That's going to be hard.
It's a necessary transition for our kids to get back to a place where we are operating on that regular schedule.
I'm fearful of dropouts.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that that's a place where our role is going to be supporting our
We're gonna
kids,
have to
reaching
help.
out to our kids, helping them transition back to that schedule.
You're not going to pay their salary to pay that car payment and that insurance and help their family finance and stuff. though.
Their number one job is to be a student. You know, if we weren't in a pandemic last year, they'd be in school every day. So,
Yes, but we are in a pandemic and we have been, and they've had jobs for almost a year.
well, they can choose.
The final bullet that you see listed there is that students affirm face-to-face instruction or the remote learning option enrollment by the end of the day, Wednesday, March 17th. And I'll be specific about that bullet. Again, I spoke to it at the beginning, but we have committed to families that they would have the opportunity to choose each time we transitioned plans because the circumstances are different. Their family circumstances, their commitment to one or the other may choose, but we want everybody to have an ability to say, okay, should the board approve this recommendation, that you have some time to decide as a family which direction you would move forward in. And it's critically important that we know which space they're in so that we can plan accordingly.
I have a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
So, particularly at the high school level, are teachers going to be reaching out to parents or students? Because if you asked my student what he's doing,
Mm-hmm.
will be vastly different than from what mama says he's doing.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Our messaging, the messaging that would go out today, regardless of what decision the board chooses, would be going to parents about what those expectations are. Certainly, we have direct contact with students, but when we ask which one you're choosing, it is the parents who we would be reaching out to. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I think really, like, had you given my 17-year-old a choice to stay remote 8 to 12 or come to school 8 to 3, he's going to choose the 8 to 12. So, I mean, I totally understand what Ms. Case, especially in our lower poverty families, some of those students help pay the bills, but I'm glad that it's 8 to 3 because our students are suffering because they're not there. So yeah, I applaud you for that, even though it's going to be hard.
So every transition's been hard. And I think we can acknowledge that. I don't share the recommendations or, and again, share the concerns that each time we have moved, it's been difficult and it will be difficult again. But we know that that move is a step toward what we are all seeking, which is an opportunity to return to what we remember public education being. And this is that recommended next step. Mr. Bridges?
Dr. Bryan, if we do return to Plan A, how will our extracurricular activities be affected?
Right now, they would stay as they are. We're following the High School Athletic Association guidelines as it relates to athletic participation. Our extracurricular activities are using those same capacity rules and guidelines and group gatherings. But what we know is extracurricular activities are a critical part of the engagement that we have with students. When we talk about how we are helping them to develop socially, how we're reconnecting them to the school communities, how we're helping them to feel normal again, the extracurricular piece has been a critical part of that.
So
Yes, ma'am.
remote learners on Plan A for the high schools will be on the computer 7 hours a day.
Not necessarily. That balance that we talk about professionally that we'll be expecting of our teachers is say, yes, there is availability. Their schedule is 8 hours a day, but they wouldn't be on the computer necessarily for that entire period of time. They might be on for a 30 or a 45-minute block first thing during one period and then work independently of the others, much in the same way as happening during our classes right now. Students from the 8 to 12 are often asked to work independently during those spaces of time, and we trust our teachers. Our teachers are professionals, and they understand creating balance in those spaces will be very important. The last slide, if I can, is one that you have seen, I'm not sure how many times now, several dozen. Bullet 1, very important. Any plan that the board chooses today is fluid. It has to be contingent on community health data and local health data. We will continue to work in close coordination with the Henderson County Department of Public Health and partner agencies to ensure the safe operations of our schools, contact tracing, quarantining guidance, and reporting to our school communities. We'll respond to those questions and concerns, updated direction, DPI, DHHS, and otherwise, and then again, continue to meet the instructional obligations to our students. So with that in mind, Mr. Craven, members of the board, I will pause and glad to address any other questions that you may have from the group.
All right, I've got a couple questions for you to get started. So just to reiterate what your recommendation and your admin team's recommendation is, and you've discussed this with all the principals from middle school and high school, correct?
We have, with all of our principals, all 23.
All 23. Is for us to transition middle school and high school back on Monday, March 22nd, which is a week and some change away.
Yes, sir.
With the required teacher workday on that Wednesday, March 17th. Is that enough time for our teachers, that one workday, to be able to transition appropriately and properly to a full Plan A schedule?
I believe that every additional day that would be considered by this board just gives our staff more time to be better prepared. If I'm speaking from the lens of a teacher, each day that I have to prepare means I'm going to be better prepared. We made that recommendation for Wednesday because we recognized that to choose any of the other days could potentially adversely affect students who are scheduled to attend school. But the legislation allows it. And again, we are talking about a timeline that is quick when you think about that 1 week. And so when I hear your question, I would simply affirm for you that 1 day of required teacher workday is an opportunity for people to prepare. If the board were to consider two's going to be a benefit. If you give me 2 days to sharpen my saw before I start chopping wood, that's going to be a sharper saw. And so I believe that the board could consider additional days. And if you were, then we certainly could make a recommendation about where we best see those fitting.
So if if 2's going to be better and we continue our Wednesday right now, which for 6 through 12 is a remote day for all students, and we want to keep the schedules even, if you will. So Thursday's A day, Friday's B day. So let's say if we took that Thursday and Friday as teacher work days, would that give our teachers more opportunity to be better prepared for that Monday, March 22nd?
I believe it certainly would. Yes, sir.
Okay. Next question.
Can I ask what that would do? Because legislators said that we could take that day, right? They're giving that to us.
They didn't specify day or which day. They simply said we could adjust, the legislation says we can adjust our calendars to create teacher work days to prepare for any transition.
Okay, I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
didn't know if we'd have to be shifting something else in the schedule, but we talked about this before the meeting began. I think that it's imperative that we give them, you know, like you were saying, the Thursday, Friday, just so that they're the most prepared to have all these students back in the room and everything run as smoothly as possible. I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
somebody-
And so as Mr. Craven said, if the board were to consider that, that would allow next week, for example, to be an A day, a B day, a remote learning day,
Uh-huh.
right? Rather than the recommendation that you saw here.
You know, that's pretty soon. Most of our folks, the 1,200 whatever that were vaccinated back at late February, are receiving their second doses of the vaccine, if they so choose, next Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yes, sir.
Correct. And I mean, the data's everywhere on when that effectiveness of that second dose hit. Is it 48 hours? Is it 2 weeks? Is it somewhere in between? We don't know. Why the 22nd instead of, say, the 29th or even the week after spring break, which is April 12th?
When we look at the immunization data, and we talked about that on that particular slide, 92% effective in that particular space after dose 1 in 14 days. We're trying to look at it through that medical lens and the recommendations of our healthcare providers and our medical leaders about the adult safety and the community safety for those who chose to participate. Certainly, I think we all also understand that we are in the final quarter starting on Monday of the school year. To push the start date for this transition out also bookends with spring break and essentially creates less time for face-to-face instruction. And to be very candid, we have to remember that this school year ends in May, not in June.
Yeah.
It ends in May. And so if we were to return to face-to-face instruction, let's say a week beyond the recommendation, we'd have 1 week and then we'd be on spring break. Or we would return after spring break, we'd have 2 weeks, and we'd roughly be into our end of year testing and assessment schedule. We believe that it's best to help create this opportunity for our students and some stability, to have this opportunity as close to the full final quarter as possible.
Sure. Ms. Caskey, Dr. Revis, do you guys have any questions right now?
I do. I have two. Well, one is a comment that I totally agree that it's imperative that our teachers have those 2 days for teacher work days. I know that today is a teacher work day, but remember they're getting grades in, so we really can't count that as a preparation for our new plan. So I love the idea of Wednesday remote, Thursday, Friday, teacher work days. My second comment is for those teachers receiving their second dose on March 20th, what about those who have had, some type of effect? I mean, I know one of our board members mentioned that, she was in bed for 5 days afterwards. We had people with fever for 2 or 3 days. So how is that going to be handled if people have their second dose on March 20th, but are feeling ill for 4 or 5 days after?
Ms. Caskey, while we've been unable to predict how each individual will respond to the vaccine, part of the reason that we worked with our local healthcare providers to schedule those as close to possible as weekends on the Fridays and the Saturdays is to make sure that we do have a little bit of time to have a sense of what that might be. And so if someone were not feeling well on Saturday or Sunday, it would give us time to prepare and then make decisions instructionally and from a staff standpoint. And so we would of course monitor that on a case-by-case basis as it relates to staffing availability. Okay,
but would they count as days if they are just out of the loop for 5 days? I mean, as we know, some people have had that effect.
Do you mind asking the first part of your question? I didn't hear the first part of your question.
Sure. If their reaction after their second vaccine is, as some people have said after their second vaccine, a 4 to 5 day of chills, fever, not feeling great, pretty much flu symptoms, will those be counting as sick days if our teachers cannot attend school, say Monday the 22nd or 23rd?
And I'm going to defer for just one second to Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Shatley as it relates to eligibility for absenteeism. I don't want to get that wrong. And so, Mr. Shatley, do you mind addressing that one specifically?
If somebody is ill after getting the second vaccine shot, I mean, they would still be allowed to take any accrued leave that they would be eligible for if they didn't feel like they could come to school because of the illness. There is no special leave provisions for this, such as if you were quarantined under by the local health department because you were either close contact or you were a presumptive case of COVID. You know, we had special federal and state leave for those particular instances. There are no special leaves for staff member if they are ill after getting the vaccine, but they would still be allowed to use all accrued leave available to them.
And I would just add to that, I guess, from the perspective of regardless of A or B, whenever people take the second dose of the vaccine, we're still scheduled to operate school. And so whether you were on a Plan B operation or a Plan A operation, if someone had an adverse response to the vaccine, that they would be absent from school or they would take eligible leave accordingly.
Okay, I just don't want people to not take the second dose
Certainly.
because they heard, well, we're 92% covered after the first dose. And if I get sick, I'm going to have to use up my sick time or annual leave time. So I just don't want to discourage anybody from taking that second dose because of having to possibly use up their sick time.
Hey, thank you so much for that note, Ms. Cassie, because again, we definitely don't want that slide and that data point to be grounds for encouragement to not participate in the second dose. It's simply a data point as it relates to individual personal health and the recommendation moving forward.
That's good, Dr. Revis. Dr. Revis, do you have any questions?
I really don't have a question, but I've got just a little bit different idea and twist on the transition back, maybe taking care of some of the concerns. What if next week we did 4 remote days, A day, B day, in and out, Monday through Thursday, Friday, teacher work day, and the following Monday, a teacher work day. And that would give us a cushion day at the end of that second vaccine dose. Just a thought.
Dr. Revis, I'm making the note, so to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, what you're asking the board to consider is remote learning days Monday through Thursday next week, and then bookend teacher work days?
Well, remote with in-person A day, B day. And that way, both groups of students get 2 full days next week.
Yes, ma'am.
In person.
Dr. Revis, do you mind if I ask Mr. Steve Smith, who just showed up to our meeting, to ask him a few questions regarding how people are feeling after their second dose? I want to put you on the spot. Oh, that's Mr. Greenmeyer.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Of course.
Ah, goodness.
Hey,
I'm
come tell us
Yeah,
how people
come tell
are
us,
feeling.
Mr. Greenmeyer. I thought you were Steve Smith for a second there.
When you said Steve Smith, I said, where's Steve?
Yeah, that's Mr. Greenmeyer. I apologize.
He would like to tell you about his birthday.
I'm sorry. You know, I think it's a valid point. You know, I'll be honest. After my first vaccine, I was sick. You know, I had the chills the next day. I didn't feel good. I had a fever. Woke up Sunday, didn't feel great. Sunday afternoon, sometime after my third nap, I felt fine again, right? I don't know how it's going to affect me clearly for my second dose, but there is something to be said that folks have had some flu-like or reactions to one or both doses.
And that does affect a lot more of our staff than the 4-week dose, right? There was only like 200 or something.
There are about 300 that are
300.
in the 4-week or the Moderna group. Yes.
So the Moderna group would be they wouldn't be receiving their vaccines until almost 2 weeks.
You're essentially looking, when we talk about creating the cushion,
Yeah,
you're thinking at about 1,000 people.
1,300 for Moderna.
Yes, sir.
1,000 for Pfizer. So, I like Dr. Revis's idea, but I'm not sure that even if we did that, do we do that the next week? Because it seems like we might be running up against that again. if there's a second dose of Moderna coming out. So I
I think, you know, again, it is hard to predict who will have any type of reaction. I think what we've heard loud and clear from the board, and we certainly support this as a leadership team, is giving teachers 2 days to prepare will benefit the transition. And if that is on Thursday and Friday, or as Dr. Revis posed, on Friday and then Monday, and then protecting the instruction all next week for folks so that we start on a Tuesday, I think both of those are going to be great supports for our teaching staff and our support personnel and otherwise, wherever the board sees them as a best fit.
And we're still talking about the 26th and 27th for some of our teachers getting that second shot.
Yes, ma'am, you're exactly right. Absolutely.
So where you're the expert, I'll sell you an HVAC unit or put some electric in your house, but you know about this. Where do you see that being the most beneficial, Friday and Monday or Thursday and Friday? I mean,
or Wednesday.
The what I would say about Dr. Revis's suggestion, and I would even look for head nods on this, is that protects the instructional schedule for every kid next week.
Right.
Because we reduce to Monday and Wednesday and take Thursday and Friday, again, those 2 days being important, that actually has reduced the instructional content time for students, right? Now I have 1 day of face-to-face instruction rather than 2, okay? And preferably, as if we're considering moving toward Wednesday as a remote only day is not the face-to-face opportunity.
Right.
And so it feels like in order to honor the staff need for preparation and again, student contact time, which is of value, 4 days of instruction next week with a Friday that is a work day and a Monday that is a work day seems to benefit both groups the best.
okay.
So let me get this straight. You're saying A students would be Monday, Wednesday,
Yes, sir.
How
Yes.
would
Yeah,
you-
Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday. Yes, sir.
and then Tuesday, Thursday, B. So
B
we'd have-
students, and then Friday would be a work day, Monday would be a work day, and then all students who chose face-to-face would have the ability to do so. And we would modify our language about when we asked people to affirm by that point.
Let's talk about transportation. Can you get our transportation folks, Fred? Can he make that work in that short of time?
Yes, sir. That essentially is us moving back to normal operations in terms of students who are on the school bus, much like we've remembered it to be. But that Plan A operation eliminates the social distancing element, so it would not be multiple runs. You'd be running full buses at full tilt.
Okay.
And that bothers me. 50 kids on a bus, 50 high school and middle school kids on a bus is scary. I don't know what you can do about it because you can't social distance unless you make more runs.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
that's just.
We know that
Plan.
that face covering requirement is still there, and I think that's a sincerely held concern that we have as well. What we continue to see is that we don't have situations of exposed transmission on school buses. We're not having to quarantine entire buses or shut down schools or linked cases. As this board knows, we're reporting just a handful of cases a day right now. And so while elementary school students are operating that way right now, we're not seeing that adversely affect the school
little.
operations. Ma'am?
They're little, high school kids are big.
Understood. Yes,
Let
ma'am.
me go to another point in the legislation that was just signed, and that was we are given, the superintendent and local boards are given the opportunity to switch and make changes as necessary on a school-by-school basis or even a district-wide basis based on transmission or if we have a COVID breakout or anything of that nature. Whatever this board decides today, I think we need to allow Dr. Bryant and his team to be able to make a decision without bringing us back together on whether that's to close a school,
Agreed.
whether that's to shut down a bus route, whatever that case may be. I would like for us to give him that opportunity for these last 9 weeks to make that decision because that decision is going to need to be made quickly.
And I think that it
If
would
needed.
be very pertinent to say to parents, if this is a step, it's our first pandemic, we find this is a step in the wrong direction, we may scale back at some point and go back to B. But I'm all in going for A, and I want it to be for the rest of the school year, but just, we might have to make a difficult call.
Sure. I'd like to hear some head nods on or see or get a little consensus from you folks here, our leadership team. what do we feel would be best for our students and really our teachers as far as giving them time to prepare for this transition? Is that Wednesday, and then like was presented here, taking Thursday, Friday off next week, or taking Friday and Monday off?
I think we would, and I'll just ask for a show of hands right here from this group. We'll pretend like it's a democracy for a second. Specific to this,
I think it's important to get everybody's opinion. We're throwing things at you at a pretty
certainly,
rapid pace.
certainly. I think we see affirmation that 2 days is better than one for our teaching staff, and thumbs up and head nods across the board.
Okay, so is it Thursday,
Which
Friday,
days?
Friday, Monday?
I think protecting for students that Monday through Thursday, as Dr. Revis has indicated, with the bookend work days is the balance for both. And do we see affirmation on that? Yes, across the board.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
thing-
I agree.
All right.
Good.
One thing that was mentioned on the 11th slide, it says, scheduled on the adopted school calendar that occurs 21 days after the effective date of this act. But there's another point that says that this could be enacted as soon as it was signed, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So it essentially was saying to anyone who is reading the proposed legislation that whenever it is ratified, you have 21 days to comply, especially because there were a number of school systems across the state that were not operating under Plan A for elementary school. So it was saying you had 21 days to comply with those provisions.
You don't have to wait 21 days.
No, sir, you do not.
Okay, thank
You can move you can move faster, but you can't go longer than that.
Okay.
And you all have really met the obligations of the bill already.
Yeah, we're at the most that we can do
yeah.
prior to them signing it.
The only thing that you were required to do under this bill would be to offer students with IEPs and 504 plans the option to go to school every day in
Sure.
the high schools and middle schools. Otherwise, you've met the obligations of the bill already because your middle and high schools are already in Plan B. Now you just have the option to move forward. The 21 days is really for districts who don't have grades K through 5 in Plan A, or grades K through 6 and grades 6 through 12 in Plan B already. They had 21 days to get those plans shifted. So you guys are in good shape. You just have the option now to move even further forward.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
John, there was something I read that you guys have to put out a plan and turn it in. It has to be approved.
Well, it doesn't have to be approved, it has to be submitted. So we have to indicate to the Department of Health and Human Services, and we are prepared, we've already drafted a letter to that effect, that if the board were to vote for this recommendation, we have to notify them of what our plan is to operate under A. So it's those basic details that you are familiar with as it relates to the way our elementary schools have been operating, in terms of what that looks like and what that operation is. And so one of the requirements is that we notify DHHS that we are operating under that way. But the language is pretty specific that DHHS doesn't approve that. They simply receive it.
Okay. Have teachers already been told through their principals about the 22nd date?
Yes.
Many of them have. I know that we shared this information, but I don't want to speak to everybody, as we've provided the information to be shared today. So folks will have opportunity and access to it as it relates today. We met with our administrative groups. Dr. Fry and Mr. Rhodes met with our superintendent's teachers advisory group yesterday. Those are teacher representatives from all 23 schools. We shared that information with them. We ran through the entire slide deck with them last night.
Okay. Are we jerking the rug out from under teachers again with a closer coming if we go with the other deal with some of them probably already started planning, if I know teachers, the 22nd. And
Well, what I heard here actually moves that back one more day. It actually kind of creates one more day of preparation. And so if we went with the Thursday and Friday, we're not starting on the 22nd, we're starting on the 23rd, is what I would hear us.
Okay. And Blair and I went to a high school and we saw how little social distancing there's going to be in high school classes. And after this starts, I would like to ask all of us to go to high school and even middle school and see how close those kids are going to be.
Yeah, I'm welcome. I welcome that. We can. Kathy and myself can change around the schools that we were planning to go see next week, the week after, whenever we're going, and we can go see high schools if that's what you like
As
to
you
do.
and I know.
Yeah, listen. With Plan A, we all know this, that there's not going to be any social distancing. We know that. Plan B has social distancing, but Plan A, it's not going to happen, especially in our middle schools. I think more middle school students are going to come back than high school students. I think having virtual from 8 to 3 might change that a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because you're not getting off at 12 and doing, whatever. But social distancing is going to be gone when we move to Plan A.
Yes.
So with that in mind, I'd like to make a motion, Dr. Bryant.
Wait
Yes,
a
sir.
minute. Have y'all talked to the principals about 500 kids being in the high school hallways at one time?
We have been
Anything they
regular
can do?
dialogues with our principals, all of them, as it relates to that. And I think, as you've mentioned, and I'll use our elementary schools as a perfect example of the creative solutions to limit those kind of spaces. We're going to have to be thoughtful about class transitions, where students gather, guidance that we give to our students, our expectations in those spaces. And a lot of that is going to be how we have problem solved the entire time, Miss Case.
And lunches?
Yes, ma'am, the same, absolutely. What lunches look like. If the Lord will give us the weather He's been giving us, we can eat outside every day. That'd be really wonderful moving forward. But we will just have to continue to look at what that looks like over the last 8 weeks.
My motion is this. I recommend that Henderson County Public Schools goes to Plan A starting on March the 23rd, with Friday, March 19th and Monday, March 22nd being required teacher workdays. Also, refiguring that A-B calendar for next week for our students, with A students being Monday, Wednesday, B students being Tuesday, Thursday. And also giving Dr. Bryant and his team the ability to make changes to that schedule and to this plan if necessary. And I'll take a second if there is one.
A second. Hallelujah. Amen.
I got it first.
I think we've got a second by Mr. Egoff. Is there any more discussion?
I just wanted to point out, so this is like double-edged sword. The ability that the General Assembly has given for schools to go to Plan B and then all 504 and IEP students to do Plan A if they wish. In my opinion, that's dangerous. I mean, it's good. It's great for those kids to be in school 5 days a week, but there's also another side to it. If we stay on Plan B and those students, which we know is about 14% of them coming in, all 5 days, their peers are going to be, why are you here all 5 days? Like they're going to realize, okay, these students have a disability. And that's not my decision to make. That's the parents' decision to make. If it, if the social part of it far outweigh, or the learning part of it far outweighs the social. But I really like Plan A because it protects those students too. And I also think it's imperative. We have never had the issues that we're having with mental health as we have for this last year. It has been painfully shown throughout our community. And I think our students are the ones that have suffered the most. Most adults went back to work after a couple of months and they've just made provisions at work, wearing masks all day, etc. But our kids have not, even in our high school kids, they need this. They need silliness. They need, powder puff games and just silliness to be a kid. So I fully support this plan.
Let me clarify my motion.
Yes, sir.
This is for middle school and high school only.
That's correct.
And K through 5 would stay just like as is, as they're doing right now. The teacher workdays would not apply to them.
That's correct.
Mr. Bridges, yes,
I
please.
too support Plan A. However, I do have a question about if there's a surge in the virus in a certain school, in a certain classroom, what procedures will you take then?
We'll follow the guidance that we've been following this entire period, Mr. Bridges, which is we've had to quarantine classrooms. We've had to even shut down individual school environments. We work so closely with the health department, and we will continue to do so, that if that's a direction that is advised based on a health concern in a particular environment, that we would do so. And again, that is the authority that the board has been granted and delegated to us, and we will continue to do so on a very strict and attentive basis.
Dr. Revis, Ms. Caskey?
Yeah, I have one more comment. I am prepared to vote for this. I just want to make sure that we're making the commitment to keep listening to our parents and our teachers as this unravels, because we know that things will come up. We're not in the classroom with them. We know that things are going to come up that are going to be concerns to both parties. So I really do want to make sure that we're keeping that line of communication open to both parents and teachers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Over communication.
Dr. Revis? You have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Egoff?
One thing I do want to say is this, and I'm not a medical doctor either, but this COVID is like the flu. It is a virus. This virus will not be eradicated, just like the flu is not eradicated. This is going to be with us, unfortunately, for many years to come. Hopefully, it won't be anywhere near what it is now. We have the vaccines. We know much more than we did in the past. However, this will not become, quote, extinct. This is a virus. This is a new normal that we're in right now. And I think, and I just want to, I hear exactly what you're saying, Dr. Bryant, about the legislatures. I appreciate, it's nice to hear the bipartisanship. It's nice to see people working together to come up with a solution that benefits everybody. It's nice to see in our local community, the teachers, the staff, the health organizations, everybody working together, coming up with a plan and saying, hey, look, let's get the teachers who so choose to get vaccinated. Then that's okay. Then you look at the students and you say, okay, students and parents, if you don't feel comfortable, you still have the option of staying virtual. But this is the new normal. We've got to figure out how to keep going, because this is not going to go away. So I really appreciate everybody working together, coming up with plans, coming up with the teachers and staff for vaccination, coming up with the virtual option always. And I'm for this option, Plan A, or the recommendation, or Mr. Blair's, Chairman Blair's motion.
All right. Any other discussion?
I'm not for it.
Well, we're about to call
Okay.
for an individual vote, so you'll get to have that turn. So, Mrs. Caskey, is that a yes or a no on the motion that's on the floor?
It's a yes.
Dr. Revis?
Yes.
Mr. Bridges?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
No.
Mrs. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Egoff?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. It passes 6-1. All right, without any further, anything else on our agenda, I'll call for an adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you, guys.